Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. I'm James Baggett, I'm the founder of Car Dealer magazine, and today I'm delighted to be chatting to Swansway Garages director, Peter Smyth. Peter, good morning, how are you?
Good morning, James. I'm absolutely fine.
Nice to see you. Thanks ever so much for joining.
Yeah, nice to see
us.
you.
So for those who don't know Peter and his family have been in the motor trade all of their lives. Peter started in the showroom working for his dad at the tender age of just 7. I mean, that is some child labour right there, isn't it? His father founded RRG Group in 1967 before selling it in 2000. Then 3 years later, set up Swansway. There's been lots more in between, hasn't there, Peter? I mean, let's start with that. Let's talk about this fantastic history your family's got in the motor trade and give people watching a little bit of insight into that.
Well, I think in fairness, my father has to take the vast majority of the credit. He was a door-to-door salesman working for Hoover Limited, selling vacuum cleaners. He started to rent out lock-up garages because he realised that people needed somewhere to put this precious commodity called a motor car. And then one day he was given the opportunity to buy what was effectively a wooden shack on Radcliffe Road in Bolton in 1967, and him and my mum started from there. They acquired the Toyota dealership, I believe, in June 1970, grew that business. At the same time, they had a burgeoning forecourt business that he sold back to ExxonMobil in the 80s. He also was the founder of a company called Elton Vehicle Contracts, where he worked alongside Dennis Studholme, who now has Car Benefit Solutions. They sold that in 1996 to the Abbey National Building Society. People remember that. I think Santander now. And it still forms part of Lex Autolease today. And after 2003, when we set up Swansway, we founded a business in the RRG days called EMAC, but we didn't sell that part of the business. And we became then a national service plan provider, which my father subsequently sold. So he's a bit of a serial entrepreneur. And let me tell you, this lockdown is not helping him because he's obviously at an age now where he has to isolate. But one thing's for sure, I think he's getting the vaccine next week. He's going to come out like a caged lion.
You better prepare for that, Peter.
I think we had.
What was it like growing up completely embedded in the motor trade?
Well, when you say I worked in the showroom, I didn't work in the showroom. Me and my brothers were kind of outside picking up litter. We were serving petrol, because in those days you used to serve people petrol, along with my mum. What was it like? My dad made it hard for us because he worked us hard and he gave us disciplines, but he also there were things that we picked up, and there were sort of like standards and sort of like retail principles that we hold dear to this very day. So what was it like? Yeah, it was interesting. There was a lot of sitting in the back of cars when we used to go and do dealer transfers, but yeah, it was fun.
So was there any danger of you not being in the motor trade?
We weren't forced down the route, in fairness. I worked, when I left school, for they were the biggest retailer of motor cars in the UK. They were called Lex Service PLC. I used to sell Itals and Ambassadors and Mini Metros and things like that. I think my younger brother John worked for Sainsbury's. My older brother had his own forecourt business before we all kind of came together. So there was no pressure to do it, which is just something we fell into.
So all of your brothers are involved in Swansway now.
Exactly.
How's that work? I mean, I've got a family of 4 brothers, and the last people I want to go into business with would be any of them. How does it work for you?
Well, if you'd have asked my mum when we were somewhere between the ages of probably 5 and 15, she would have said, absolutely no way, because we fought like cat and dog. And I mean, physical fighting. You know, we were 3 lads. I have a sister as well, who's not in the business, although her husband is. We're very, very like-minded. We're all of a similar age. My parents had children from 1962 to 1967, and they had 4 children. So my mum was permanently pregnant, I think, at that time. We're very, very like-minded, but we all bring differing skill sets to the party. And, you know, we have the same shared sense of humour, and we think in the same way.
So who calls the shots then, Peter? You know, I mean, when you're sat around the boardroom table making a decision, I mean, is there anybody that actually goes, well, no, this is what we're doing?
Yeah, my father still does that.
Yeah.
Even at he would call the ultimate shots between the three of us. It's really quite simple. We work on the basis that we have a vote because there's three of us. It's either 2 against 1, or all three agree. But we have a pact whereby the one who maybe doesn't agree absolutely decides to totally get behind the decision and not try and spoil it and say, "I told you so." But most of the time, I think we're all three of us are focused. Indeed, 4 of us with my father will be focused in the same way. We have the odd disagreements on certain things.
I mean, it's clearly worked. Talk to me about the growth of Swansway and how it came about and how it's grown over the years.
Well, my father sold RRG to Marubeni in November 2000. And we had to work a notice period. So it wasn't until we acquired what was a company called LC Charles Limited, which consisted of a Volkswagen retailer in Crewe, an Audi retailer, which was called Charles Audi. And at the same time, Audi were rationalising their market areas. So we acquired 2 businesses virtually at the same time from Rybrook, which happened to now be Stoke and Stafford Audi. And we've grown predominantly with the Volkswagen Group over the next 17 years. So we're at a stage now whereby we have 6 Audi. We have 3 Volkswagen passenger car businesses, one we've just acquired in Oldham. We have SEAT. We have 4 very, very successful Volkswagen commercial vehicle dealerships, and other franchises we have. We have Jaguar, Land Rover, we've got Peugeot, and we also have Honda, which we control the Manchester market area for Honda. Plus, we have a branded used car offering called Motormatch.
So where did the name Swansway come from?
Quite interesting, actually. My father owned a house. And it was called Swansway, and we were kind of sat around the kitchen table there, and we said, "Look, what we're going to call this entity before because you've got to set up an entity to buy something." And I don't know who it was. Said, "Well, why don't we name it after my father's house?" And that's where the name Swansway comes from. It's as simple as that.
And Peter, let's talk a little bit about the current state of the market. I mean, we've just seen the new car sales registrations come out this morning from the SMMT. Down by a third in November, as we reported yesterday. How have you seen that November performance, and what do you think is going to happen going forward into December?
Well, we've actually enjoyed probably our best November in our history, and I think it's all about the attitude, and we have a can-do attitude at Swansway. Our new car sales were down in some franchises, but in other franchises, and I haven't seen the figures that you've been party to, but I would imagine Audi performed particularly well. And our Audi centres were very, very strong. We were strong in commercial vehicles, but we were very strong still in used cars. I think that in terms of volume, we actually sold and delivered via click and collect more cars in November 20 than we did in November 19.
That is incredible. I'm hearing similar performances from other dealers. I mean, do you think the industry has managed to completely convert themselves to this click and collect solution? And do you think is it going to be something that buyers are going to want to do going forward?
I'll tell you what I think about the motor car industry. I think people massively underestimate our ability as retailers. And I'm talking now about some of the new entrants have come in. And I'm also talking about the OEMs. We're a resilient lot, you know, and we're used to working on fine margins, and we're used to ducking and diving and bobbing and weaving. And I'm not just talking about Swansway now, I'm talking about the motor trade in general. If I'm being completely frank, COVID has been very kind to the motor industry.
You wouldn't have thought that back in March, though. I mean, you looked at this industry back in March and April. I mean, people were predicting doomsday. And now many dealers I'm speaking to are reporting some of their best ever years. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't, because with Swansway, it will be our best ever year. It was interesting. I was listening to what Mark Lavery said when you interviewed him the other week, and he said, we must be the worst forecasters in the memory of man, when he talked about what he thought he would make during COVID and what he ended up actually making. And in fairness to Mark, I thought it was a cracking set of results, because he didn't enjoy the September market as well. Yeah, when I went to the bank and said, this is where I thought it would be, they kind of scratched their heads, and they've come back to us since and said, well, what was all that about? But who was to know? Who was to know?
And what do you think is driving that? I'm hearing reports that many people have saved money during this year, not gone on holiday, and they're treating themselves to a car. There's other people that are saying public transport's still being avoided, and people are buying the cheaper cars instead. What are you seeing at the coalface? I mean, is it a combination of that, or is it something else?
I think a combination of a number of things, and I'm probably going to be a little controversial now. I think it's that people haven't spent on holidays. I think there's a degree of people buying cheaper cars who might normally use public transport. The controversial bit is I think there's a lot of people who've got the loans from the governments and spent them on cars. Now, at some stage, they're going to have to give that money back. But it isn't unheard of, and you do hear customers in the showroom talking in that way. Yeah,
I mean, that is something I picked up on earlier this year. I mean, a few of the luxury car dealers that we were speaking to mentioned that a lot of customers were coming in saying that they're spending their bounce back loan and putting a deposit down on some seriously hefty stuff. Interesting that you've seen that as well in your dealerships. I mean, I take it that would be the high end, the Audis and the Jaguar Land Rovers that people are spending now on.
Yes. Particularly Land Rover, and particularly high-end Audis. The RS product's been very, very successful for us, and the high-end Audis, that's been incredibly successful for us. Haven't seen that kind of growth in Jaguar, and I think that's because of the demographic of the customer. And it's also our Honda businesses have been quiet. And again, if you think of the average age and the type of person who drives a Honda, it's really not surprising in the current climate. But yes, definitely with our premium stuff.
So what are you predicting for next year? I mean, we've talked a little bit there about forecasting. Have you managed to forecast anything for 2021?
Well, I think we are quietly optimistic. We can't not be. Myself and my brothers and my fathers are directors of the business. We've got to be optimistic. And like I go back to before, the retail motor trade are a resilient bunch of people. And it's really quite simple. You could say to me, well, if we have a hard Brexit, are we going to sell less new cars? Yeah, probably. But then the value of new cars is going to subsequently rise, and we'll concentrate more on used cars. Whatever hand we get dealt at Swansway, we'll deal with it.
What was it like for the business when that first lockdown was announced, and what's it been like having to deal with the subsequent ones? I mean, I know you operate in Wales, so you must have had to deal with the fire break there, and then this second lockdown. I mean, what have those interruptions to the business been like to deal with?
Well, lockdown 1 was totally different to lockdown 2. Lockdown 1, when it first came out that we were going to have to close, like other people who own businesses, we were kind of staring into the abyss. And then, of course, the government came out with the furlough scheme, and that helped us. But like most large dealer groups who've got fixed costs and they've got to pay them, like rents and other things, we certainly in April and in May were staring down the barrel of serious losses. And I think the losses got to about 3.9 million loss by the 31st of May. But what amazed me is how we got it back so quickly. We haven't abused the furlough scheme, and certainly I we took the decision to get as many people back in May as we possibly could. And in fairness, with May, we halved the losses that we made in April. We pitched in. We've reacted very quickly. We have a morning Zoom meeting at 9:30 where the senior directors, and I include my father in that, who has it at home. And interestingly enough, and I admire this, he puts his shirt and tie on for that meeting. Call him old school, but you've got to admire him for doing that. And we're able to move quickly and make quick decisions. And certainly that is a discipline that we're going to carry on with all the time, I guess, that we're going to be in business now, because we found it so helpful.
Were you ready for online car sales, or have you had to radically change your business to facilitate that?
No, we were moving towards it, but we've certainly come on leaps and bounds in that time, because there's an age-old saying, necessity is the mother of invention. It's a little bit like Sylvester Stallone chasing that chicken in Rocky 1. It's all now about greasy speed, how quickly you get your cars on, that they're priced competitively, that the pictures are right, that there's a video, and that you remain competitive with the marketplace. And
are people able to fully transact on your website from end to end?
They can, yeah, well, they can, yes, they can fully transact on the website. But what we find people doing is they leave a deposit, they leave a holding deposit, and then get in contact with us. And we kind of then deal in the old-fashioned way, really. We can invite people down to the showrooms when we're allowed to, which we obviously are now. Obviously taking all the right safety precautions, getting them into the showroom and getting them dealt.
So what are your thoughts on online car sales? Are they the future?
Part of it is the future, but I also am absolutely a firm belief that the dealership or the used car pitch is also the way forward too. It's a huge investment that people make when they buy a car. They need to feel safe and secure that they're buying it off somebody, and they need to they need to touch and feel and smell the car as well. And you cannot replicate that online, no matter how hard you try. There are obviously newcomers into the market, and I have my opinions about some of those newcomers.
So on that subject, Peter, I mean, what are your thoughts on the likes of Kazoo and Cinch?
What is Alex Chesterman doing that's any different to us? I mean, one of his problems is going to be, I call it a can you just moment. So you sell a car to a customer, and sometimes a week later they may come back and say, look, I really like this used car that I bought, but this bit of trim here that's just hanging off, is there anything you can do about it for me? And what we do, we get the second-year apprentice out the workshop, and he give the customer a cup of coffee and a loop around the cars, and we fix it, and off he tootles on his way. How is Kazoo able to do that? Now, what they could do, they could say, well, you need to go to a main dealer. And if a Kazoo car came to me, and I think it's fair to say that Mr. Chesterman has done his level best to agitate the trade, I'll make sure that car goes into our workshop. We'll probably do an express vehicle health check and say to the customer, who sold you this then? It's only going to be natural. So it's also like, what about the Scottish man up in Aberdeen who buys the car off Kazoo? It will cost Kazoo £750 to transport that car up to him. He has it a week. He puts an owner on the logbook and then says, don't like this car, will you come and pick it up and give me a full refund? So he has to spend another 750 quid going picking it up. He's never dealt in an environment where he's had stock, and worse than that, he's had a stock that depreciates on a monthly basis.
So what did you think when you read his comments that came out in the Times newspaper that we reported on recently?
Well, he described the used car trade in Britain as broken. Well, I've been and seen used car operations all over the world. And let me tell you, in the UK, it's far from broken. I believe it's the most sophisticated used car market in the world. And that also includes America, who are great at selling new cars. They're great at selling services and oil changes. They're not that good at used cars. It's far from broken. And he also called us sharp-elbowed salespeople. Well, I resent that statement. We are a family business that have that live by our morals of caring, honest, and proud, and we live those values every day. And I know, because obviously I know people in the trade such as Eddie Hawthorne and Dash Gupta and Robert Forrester. These are serious businessmen doing a serious job.
What about the launch of Cinch from BCA? What were your thoughts when that came out?
Well, what I think that the people at BCA, who are obviously backed by venture capitalists, have seen the unicorn valuation of Kazoo and thought, we'll have a bit of that. When Cinch was originally launched, it was launched as a classified to rival Auto Trader. I would say the jury's out on Cinch, and personally, I think it might rattle a few cages of dealers who actually put their cars through the BCA auction system.
Do you use BCA? And yes. Are you
at the moment?
And are you using Cinch?
No, not using Cinch. I know Mark said that he's going to Mark Lavery said that he's going to get involved in it. Actually, I tell you, we do use Cinch at this moment in time because it's free. I think we've had 3 leads since June. They've got a long way to go, and they're going to have a lot of Ryland's going to have to do an awful lot of advertising on ITVB before they get up there. That's my belief.
He's certainly got a big job on his hands. I'm sure he's up to that job.
Big job with his big teeth.
What do you think will happen to used car prices? And we've seen some tremendous growth in that area this year. It's been something that's been driving a huge amount of interest on our website. What do you think is going to happen to prices going forward?
I mean, I guess a lot of it depends on Brexit. I think if we come away with a no Brexit deal and there are tariffs on new cars, then the price of used cars will increase. There has been a drop in values of used cars in November and December, and we've seen that at the auctions. But that happens every year. So I think that the market's 8-9 million. I don't know about you, but well, you're not driving into work, but I'm driving into work every day, and I am staggered at the traffic that is on the road. And there are over 30 million cars on the road, and somebody needs to look after those people driving those cars and sell them cars and service the cars. I don't profess to be the font of all knowledge, but I think that there's plenty of legs left in the motor trade. And I'm certainly in 2021 saying to my guys, Luke, we've got to sell more cars, we've got to make more money, we've got to sell more parts, we've got to make more money, and we've got to sell more hours and make more money.
And just before we finish up, are you planning for a third lockdown for your business?
No.
Do you think it will happen?
No, I don't. I don't think it will. And if it does, we'll cope.
And lastly, Peter, I mean, would you like this opportunity just to give a message to your staff who've probably had a tough year and worked incredibly hard?
Yeah, I'd just like to say to all the people who work within the Swansway team, thanks ever so much for your efforts that you've put in. It's not been an easy ride. I'd like to say just a quick special thanks to Sarah Eccles and our fleet team, who at this moment in time are getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and working until 8 o'clock at night, and to wish everybody a happy Christmas.
Peter, thank you very much for joining us today and your forthright opinions on a few things. It's been fascinating to hear about the business. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Peter, great to see you. Thanks ever so much.
Bye-bye.
So, thank you very much to Peter there for joining us for that Car Dealer Live. If you like more Car Dealer Lives like this one, you can log on to cardealermagazine.co.uk and click on the live tab at the top of the page. If you'd like to be involved in future ones, send me an email. It's james@blackballmedia.co.uk. You can find me on Twitter @CarDealerEd or find me on LinkedIn. Thanks ever so much for joining us. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.